Notice that the title of our subject for this evening is En route to a New World Order. We must ask as we begin our study today, what are the objectives of the Roman Catholic Church today? Now, we studied last time that the sign of the Roman Catholic Church's authority is the change in the law of God, the first day of the week, Sunday. If that's the case, then we would expect the papacy to seek and ensure the enforcement of the sign of its authority. In other words, the enforcement of Sunday as the day of rest. In fact, for the last 120 years, and I say 120 years because it's since a very famous encyclical called Rerum Novarum by Pope Leo XIII in 1891, the papacy's social theory has consistently used four specific expressions. One of those expressions is the common good. Basically, that means that individuality or individualism is something to be dreaded. Secondly, another common word that is used is the word solidarity. And basically what that means is that we are in this all together and we must unite in one ecumenical body and avoid at all costs sectarianism. And then there's the word subsidiarity. Subsidiarity simply means that our personal interests are subsidiary to the common good of the whole. And finally, another expression which appears very frequently in Roman Catholic social theory literature is the universal destination of goods. And basically what that means is that private property is not necessarily personal, but rather belongs to all humanity and should be redistributed according to need. Now, I'd like to read a statement that was made by a recent pope, Pope Benedict XVI. That's the pope before the one that is in now, before Francis I. Because this is where he expresses these specific terms that we've looked at as we begun our study today. This is found in Benedict's encyclical Caritas in Veritate, which means charity in truth or love in truth, paragraph 67. This is how it reads. To manage the global economy, to revive economies hit by the crisis, to avoid any deterioration of the present crisis and the greater imbalances that would result, to bring about integral and timely disarmament, food security and peace, to guarantee the protection of the environment, and to regulate migration. For all this, there is urgent need of a true world political authority, as my predecessor, Blessed John 23, indicated some years ago. Such an authority would need to be regulated by law, to observe consistently the principles of subsidiarity and solidarity, to seek to establish the common good. Do you see the terms here? To seek to establish the common good, and to make a commitment to securing authentic, integral human development, inspired by the values of charity and truth. Furthermore, such an authority would need to be universally recognized and to be vested with the effective power to ensure security for all, regard for justice, and respect for rights. Obviously, it would have to have the authority to ensure compliance with its decisions from all parties, and also with the coordinated measures adopted in various international forums. This is an unbelievable statement about the aspirations of the Roman Catholic papacy. Now the question is, who would be responsible for the implementation of this global socialist ideal? Current events clearly indicate that it will be implemented and enforced by the political leaders of the world at the behest of the Roman Catholic papacy. What Benedict XVI was saying is that the international community must accept and enforce the social moral theory of the papacy. I'm going to read you a couple of statements that are not in your material, but they are very significant when it comes to who will be behind this world authority. Pius IX, who was Pope from 1846 to 1878, wrote the following: that the principle which Leo XIII so clearly established must be laid down at the outset here, namely, that there resides in us, that is in the papacy, the right and duty, listen carefully now, to pronounce with supreme authority upon social and economic matters. So he's saying the papacy has supreme authority to speak on social and economic matters. Even more recently, Vatican Council II, which was celebrated from 1963 to 1965, stated this in one of the decisions that was made at the council. Moreover, since in virtue of her mission and nature, she, that is the Roman Catholic Church, is bound to no particular form of culture, nor to any political, economic, or social system, the Church, by her very universality, can be a very close bond between diverse human communities and nations. Now listen carefully. Provided these trust her and truly acknowledge her right to true freedom in fulfilling her mission. Now, if you look at the history of the papacy, you would wonder whether the nations of the world could really trust the papacy. But what this is saying is that the papacy can make a great contribution to the world in social and economic matters as long as the nations of the world are willing to trust the papacy. It is the papacy's objective, folks, to reestablish the union of church and state that existed during the 1260 years of papal supremacy. The ultimate papal objective is to get the civil powers of the world to enforce the sign of the papacy's authority, which we have already noticed is the observance of Sunday as the day of rest. It is no coincidence that the international community is promoting the identical causes that the Roman Catholic Church is proposing these days. Pope Francis I has found three causes that resonate with the political worlds of the political leaders of the entire world. Number one, the need to eradicate poverty and to solve the problem of massive migration. Number two, the need to save the family, however you define the word family. And finally, the need to solve the severe problem of climate change. And Francis has linked all three of these causes of his with the need for a Sunday rest. I have not included all of the statements in here from Pope Francis I, but what he says is the environment needs one day a week to rest. And I'll bet you can't guess which day he says the environment should rest. Sunday. He has also said that the capitalist overlords need to give the overworked poor a day of rest. I'll bet you can't guess which day that is. Sunday. He has also stated that the family needs one day to attend church and to connect with its spiritual roots. I'll bet you can't guess which day that is. Sunday. There are danger signals very close to home, folks. Let me just share some of those danger signals with you in our very country. As you know, last year, towards the end of September, Pope Francis I visited the United States of America. His first visit was to the White House, where he sat down with President Obama for about 45 minutes, and the problems that they addressed were the very problems that are the talking points of this Pope: poverty, immigration, and the problem of climate change. Then the Pope addressed a joint session of the Congress of the United States of America. And once again, the talking points were family, poverty, and climate change. Next, the Pope gave a speech to inaugurate the 70th anniversary of the United Nations. And he addressed before the United Nations, even in a stronger language, these same issues. When Francis finished his presentation, he received a standing ovation from the leaders of 193 nations of the world. And this standing ovation lasted for several minutes. Then Pope Francis moved on to Philadelphia to celebrate the family. I was personally there with a crew from Secrets Unsealed. There were millions of persons there from every religion and from every nation on earth. In fact, the Pope celebrated an outdoor Mass on September 27 of last year. He also gave a speech before Constitution Hall. This is the most amazing thing of all, because in Constitution Hall in Philadelphia is where the three founding documents of the United States were ratified: the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. And there stood the Pope in the very place where these were ratified, an individual who does not believe in any of what we find in the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, and he's speaking to a multitudinous crowd. Now, I want you to notice also that the United States and the Vatican have become closer and closer with the passing of time. Probably many of you are aware of the fact that Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II cooperated in a secret alliance to overthrow what used to be the Soviet Union. It was an incredible alliance. In fact, it's described in the book His Holiness. And it's a fascinating book. It's pretty large. It's about, I would say, 500 or 600 pages by Woodward and Bernstein, the Watergate guys, remember, from the Washington Post? Actually, this book describes how the United States and the Vatican colluded through military strength and through the intelligence of the papacy to overthrow the former Soviet Union. We also know that recently the Pope maneuvered so that the United States could establish diplomatic relations with the Vatican. And President Obama requested that Pope Francis help him in the process of closing the prison there at Guantanamo. There has been a very close relationship in the last 2 or 3 decades between the United States and the Roman Catholic papacy. Now, I'd like to present one example as to how the papacy gets its foot in the door to influence the political powers of the world. We are going to use the example of climate change. You see, the political leaders of the world and the papacy have the same basic theme concerning climate change. And I believe that the papacy is really behind all of this talk about the need for a solution to climate change. Let's go through the different steps that the papacy has taken. In April of 2015, the Pope gave us a speech before the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences. The report was published, and the name of it was Climate Change and the Common Good. I read this entire document. It presents a doomsday scenario of what will happen to this planet if the issue of climate change is not resolved. Then, on May 24, 2015, the Pope published his encyclical Laudato Si, which basically this encyclical addresses the problem of climate change. I have also read this entire encyclical. it presents also a doomsday scenario if this problem is not addressed. Political leaders all over the world have lauded this encyclical. They said this is the type of thing that we need the world to know so that the world can address this severe problem.